Family dinner, age 14. "You're nothing but a burden," my stepdad said, throwing me out with just a backpack. 4 years of shelters and hunger followed. Last Tuesday, on my 18th birthday, while they lived in their suburban home with 2 BMWs, a lawyer handed me an envelope. "Congratulations, Alex, you're now worth $42 million. My name is Alex Rivera, and this is the story of how my grandfather's secret plan unfolded. But before I tell you how the family that abandoned me is now begging to be part of my life, you need to understand what those 4 years on the streets taught me. My name is Alexander James Rivera. Until I turned 14, I lived what seemed like an ordinary life in Oakwood Heights, a middle-class suburb of Chicago. My mom, Elena, married Richard Thompson when I was 7, a few years after my father died in a construction accident. We weren't rich, but we had enough. A 3-bedroom house with a small backyard where I'd shoot hoops every afternoon after school. Each morning, I'd wake up at 6:30 a.m. to the smell of coffee brewing downstairs. My room was covered in basketball posters, and my most prized possession sat on my desk, a vintage compass that had belonged to my grandfather, James Rivera. He'd given it to me on my 7th birthday, just months before he moved to Florida following my grandmother's death. "This helped me find my way when I was lost," he'd told me, his weathered hands placing it in my small palms. "Maybe someday it will help you too." I was a decent student, mostly B's with occasional A's in math. Basketball was my thing, though. Coach Simmons said I had natural talent, and I dreamed of playing in college someday. My best friend Marcus lived 3 houses down, and we'd been inseparable since 3rd grade. His mom, Mrs. Johnson, always had cookies waiting when we finished practice. "You boys are going places," she'd say, with that warm smile of hers. My mom worked as a dental hygienist at Oakwood Family Dental, leaving at 7:15 each morning in her blue scrubs. She'd kiss my forehead before leaving, saying, "Be good, mijo." That was her nickname for me, Spanish for my son. It was one of the few connections to my Latino heritage that remained after my dad passed. My stepdad Richard worked in sales for a pharmaceutical company, often traveling for days at a time. When he was home, he was usually buried in his laptop at the dining room table. Things seemed okay on the surface. We had Sunday dinners together, occasional movie nights, and twice-yearly visits from Grandpa James, who'd call every other Sunday like clockwork. "How's my Explorer doing?" he'd ask, and I'd tell him about school, basketball, and my friends. The calls never lasted long, but they were consistent. Looking back, I should have noticed the changes that started when I turned 13. My mom began working longer hours, coming home exhausted and retreating to her room. Richard's sales trips grew more frequent, and when he was home, his patience with me grew thinner. Small irritations became big arguments. My music was too loud, my basketball bouncing too annoying, my appetite too expensive. Then there were the hushed arguments I'd overhear late at night. "We can't afford it anymore," Richard would say. "Your father's medical bills wiped you out, and now with the market crash, we're barely staying afloat." My mom would respond softly, her voice pleading, "He's just a boy, Richard. He's all I have left of Carlos." One Tuesday in March, I came home to find my mom sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red and puffy. "Alex, sit down," she said, her voice shaking. "We need to talk about some changes." She explained that Richard's company was downsizing, that money was tight, that they might have to sell the house. She asked if I could get a weekend job to help with expenses. "Of course," I said, eager to help. "I can ask about stocking at the grocery store." That weekend, I started working at Green's Market, stacking produce and carrying bags to cars for tips. I'd come home with my earnings, usually around $65, and proudly hand them to my mom. She'd smile, but it never reached her eyes. "Thank you, mijo," she'd say, tucking the money into her purse. I called Grandpa James that Sunday, breaking our usual schedule. When he answered, I told him about the financial problems at home. "Are you okay, Alex?" he asked, his voice concerned. "Do you need anything?" "We're okay," I lied. "Mom says it's temporary." There was a long pause on the line. Alex, I want you to remember something. Family is what matters. Real family never abandons each other. His voice sounded different, urgent, almost prophetic. If you ever need help, real help, look in the compass. Promise me. I promised, confused by his intensity, but reassured by his concern. That was the last time we spoke. 2 weeks later, my mom received a call from Florida. Grandpa James had died of a heart attack in his sleep. The funeral was small. Just me, my mom, and a few elderly neighbors from my grandfather's condo complex. Richard didn't come. Someone has to keep working, he'd said. I carried the compass in my pocket, running my fingers over its aged surface throughout the service. The lawyer who handled the estate, Mr. Blackstone, approached us afterward. "Mrs. Thompson, may I have a word?" he asked, leading my mother aside. Their conversation was brief. When she returned, her expression was tight. "What did he say?" I asked. "Your grandfather left everything to a conservation foundation," she said flatly. "There's nothing for us." That night, I overheard another argument, more heated than ever before. "He had money this whole time?" Richard's voice boomed, "and he left it all to save some goddamn trees?" "It wasn't much," my mother replied. "Just the condo and some investments." "Some investments? Elena, your father had at least $1 million in assets. You told me he was helping with Alex's college fund. Now we're stuck with everything ourselves." "He's my son, Richard. We'll figure it out." "Your son. Always your son. What about our future? We're drowning in debt, and your father could have helped. Instead, he cut us off completely." The argument continued late into the night. I lay in bed, clutching the compass, wondering why my grandfather had made that choice. "Look in the compass," he'd said. But there was nothing to see, just an ordinary, if antique, navigational tool. 2 months later, on a sweltering July evening, I came home from basketball practice to find my things packed in 2 duffel bags and a backpack. Richard was standing in the living room, my mother seated on the couch, her face in her hands. "This isn't working anymore, Alex," Richard said without preamble. "Your mother and I have decided it's best if you go live with your aunt in Detroit." I looked at my mom, waiting for her to contradict him, to stand up for me. She didn't raise her head. "Mom?" I whispered. "I'm sorry, mijo," she said, her voice barely audible. "It's just for a while, until we get back on our feet." But I knew, looking at Richard's cold eyes, that a while meant forever. My aunt, my mother's sister, whom I'd met twice in my life, didn't even know I was coming. There was no plan, no arrangement, just an excuse. "You're nothing but a burden," Richard said, the words cutting through me like a knife. "We can't carry you anymore." The first week after being thrown out was a blur of panic and disbelief. I never made it to Detroit. My aunt's phone was disconnected, and when I called my mom from a payphone to tell her, she wept but said I couldn't come back. "Richard won't allow it," she whispered. "He says we'll lose the house if we take on another mouth to feed." I spent the first night on a bench at Westfield Park, huddled under my Chicago Bulls jacket, jumping at every sound. By morning, I had $43. 76 in my pocket, 2 duffel bags of clothes, my backpack with school supplies, and the compass. Within 3 days, I'd spent $28 on fast food. By day 7, I had $2.37 left, and the sickening realization that no one was coming to save me. Month 1. I sold my basketball shoes for $45 at a pawn shop, my phone for $90, my watch, a birthday gift from my mom, for $30. Each sale felt like cutting away a piece of myself. I used the money to stay at a youth hostel for 2 weeks while looking for work. No one wanted to hire a 14-year-old without a permanent address. Month 3. Summer was ending, bringing colder nights. I'd lost 12 pounds. My clothes hung loose. I rotated between 3 shelters, none safe enough to stay at consistently. Twice, older kids stole what little I had. Once, a shelter worker called social services, but I ran before they arrived. Foster care stories from kids at the shelter terrified me more than the streets. Month 6. Winter in Chicago is brutal when you have nowhere to go. I spent days riding the L train in endless loops just to stay warm. I learned which library branches had the most lenient security guards, which fast food places would let you sit for hours if you bought a small coffee, which loading docks had warm air vents. I met other homeless kids, some who'd been on the streets for years, teaching me the survival rules. Move constantly, trust no one, stay visible in public spaces, invisible to authorities. It was in the downtown library that I met Elijah, a 67-year-old veteran who'd been homeless since returning from Afghanistan decades ago. He found me trying to wash up in the bathroom. "You're doing it wrong, kid," he said, showing me how to use hand soap and paper towels to clean under my arms without getting my clothes wet. "How long you been out here?" "6 months," I replied. He studied me with sad eyes. "You shouldn't be here. Where's your family?" "They threw me away," I said, the words still bitter on my tongue. Elijah became my unofficial guardian. He showed me which churches served hot meals on which days, which shelters had bedbug infestations, which cops would look the other way, and which would harass you for sport. He had a spot behind the convention center where the heating vents blew warm air. My winter condo, he called it with a dry laugh, sharing it with me when temperatures dropped below freezing. Month 8. I tried calling my mom from a community center phone. Richard answered. "Don't call here again," he hissed. "She's finally getting better without your drama." The line went dead before I could respond. Month 10. A social worker named Miss Reeves found me sleeping in the park. Instead of calling the authorities, she helped me enroll in a GED program at a community center. "Education is your way out," she insisted. I attended classes when I could, between searching for food and safe places to sleep. 1-year anniversary of being homeless. I saw my mother at the grocery store. I'd taken to hanging around the dumpsters out back, where employees sometimes left still good produce they couldn't sell. She was loading groceries into their new BMW, a purchase that must have happened after I left. I ducked behind the dumpster, watching her laugh with Richard as they climbed into the car. She looked happy, unburdened. I realized then that I truly had been nothing but a weight dragging her down. That night, I sat on the roof of an abandoned building, turning my grandfather's compass over and over in my hands. It was the only thing I hadn't sold, couldn't sell. "Look in the compass," he had said. In a moment of despair, I smashed it against the concrete, hoping somehow to find something hidden inside. The glass cracked, but nothing else happened. Just another broken thing in my broken life. 18 months. I developed a routine. Breakfast at St. Mark's Church on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Library from opening until 4 p.m. for GED studies. Work at Joey's Car Wash from 4 to 8 p.m., under the table, $30 a day. Dinner at the community center. Sleep wherever seemed safest, usually a different spot each night. I'd learned that routine makes you predictable, and predictable makes you vulnerable. 2 years. I had $247 saved in a prepaid debit card Miss Reeves helped me get. I'd passed my GEB. My boss at the car wash let me use the business address to apply for community college. Elijah had died during a February cold snap. I found him behind the convention center, peaceful, like he'd just fallen asleep. I was the only one at his funeral, a pauper's burial arranged by the VA. I cried for the first time since being thrown out. 3 years. I'd moved up to shift manager at the car wash, still homeless, but now renting a storage unit where I kept my few possessions and sometimes slept illegally. I was taking 2 classes at the community college. I hadn't tried contacting my mother again. 3 years, 10 months. 4 days before my 18th birthday, I saw them again, my mother and Richard, at a restaurant where I was washing dishes for extra money. They were celebrating something, clinking wine glasses. They didn't see me watching from the kitchen doorway. They looked older but comfortable, clearly not struggling financially as they'd claimed when throwing me out. Something hardened in me that night. I worked until 2 a.m., scrubbing pots with a fury I didn't know I possessed. If you're feeling moved by this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. In the comments, share if you've ever experienced betrayal or injustice. Let's build a supportive community together. On my 18th birthday, I worked a double shift at the car wash, then picked up 3 hours washing dishes at Carlucci's restaurant. No one knew it was my birthday. I'd stopped celebrating years ago. At 9:17 p.m., I trudged toward the abandoned office building where I'd been sleeping in the maintenance closet, a safer option than the shelters in that neighborhood. A black Lincoln town car idled at the curb near the building's side entrance. As I approached, a man in an impeccable gray suit stepped out. He was in his 60s, with silver hair and glasses that caught the streetlight. I immediately tensed, ready to run. Well-dressed strangers meant trouble in my experience. "Alexander Rivera," he called, his voice measured and professional. I stopped, keeping distance between us. "Who's asking?" "My name is Lawrence Blackstone. I'm an attorney with Blackstone, Morris & Chen." He extended a business card that I didn't move to take. "I represented your grandfather, James Rivera." My grandfather had been dead for nearly 4 years. "What do you want?" "I've been looking for you for some time," he said, retrieving a leather portfolio from the car. "Your 18th birthday triggers certain legal provisions in your grandfather's will." I laughed bitterly. "There's nothing in his will for me. He left everything to some conservation foundation." Mr. Blackstone's expression remained neutral. "That was what we were instructed to tell your mother and stepfather. The actual arrangements were significantly different." He gestured to the car. "I'd like to discuss this somewhere more appropriate. Perhaps you join me for a late dinner." My instincts screamed trap, but curiosity and hunger won out. I slid into the back seat, keeping my hand on the door handle, ready to bolt. 20 minutes later, we sat in a private dining room at the Capitol Grill. I felt painfully out of place in my worn jeans and faded t-shirt, but Mr. Blackstone ordered a steak dinner for me without comment on my appearance. "Your grandfather was a remarkable man," he began, opening his portfolio. "When you were 7, he came to my office to restructure his estate planning. He was concerned about your future, especially after your mother remarried." "He didn't like Richard," I said, between bites of the first real steak I'd had in years. "No, he did not," Blackstone confirmed. "He found Mr. Thompson opportunistic. When James moved to Florida, it wasn't for retirement. He was quietly liquidating his business holdings and converting them to a trust. The Conservation Foundation story was a cover." He slid a document across the table. It was a trust agreement, dozens of pages thick. "Your grandfather established the Rivera Legacy Trust, with you as the sole beneficiary, effective on your 18th birthday. The trust holds all of his assets, his business properties, investment portfolio, and liquid holdings." "How much?" I asked, my voice suddenly dry. "As of market close yesterday, the trust is valued at $42,763,419. The fork slipped from my hand, clattering against the plate. "That's impossible!" "We were struggling after Dad died. Mom was always worried about money." Blackstone nodded. "Your grandfather made arrangements with your father before his death. Carlos Rivera sold his construction company to your grandfather's holding corporation, on paper a modest transaction. In reality, James paid a premium, creating a nest egg for your father's family. That money was placed in a separate trust for your mother's benefit." He produced another document, bank statements showing monthly transfers to a separate account. "Your mother received $8,000 per month from this trust, continuing after your father's death, The payments never stopped. I stared at the statements, dates running from my childhood through the present. She was getting this money while I was sleeping behind dumpsters? Yes. Blackstone's tone held a note of disgust. After your grandfather's death, we were instructed to continue the payments but monitor your welfare from a distance. When you disappeared, we hired private investigators to locate you. It took time. Why didn't he just tell me this before he died? Why the secrecy? Blackstone removed a sealed envelope from his portfolio. Your grandfather left this for you. Perhaps it will explain better than I can. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten on heavy stationery. My dear Alex, if you're reading this, I've passed on and you've reached your 18th birthday. I hope this letter finds you well and whole, though I fear it may not. I recognized something in Richard that your mother couldn't see, or chose not to. Men like him hide their true nature from those they wish to use, but reveal it to those they perceive as threats. You were a threat to him because you represented a connection to your father that he could never sever. I created a test, one I prayed would prove my suspicions wrong. The Conservation Foundation story was designed to make them believe there was no money coming. If Richard truly cared for your mother and you, money wouldn't matter. If he was the man I feared, pressure would reveal his true character. I'm sorry for the pain this may have caused you. The compass I gave you has a false bottom. Inside is a key to a safe deposit box at First National Bank containing documentation of everything, including recordings of my conversations with Richard where he asked about my estate before your mother even introduced us. The money is yours now. Use it wisely. Remember that wealth doesn't define character, actions do. Your father knew this. I hope you do too. With love and faith in you, Abuelo James. I set the letter down, emotions warring within me. Vindication, grief, rage, and a strange sort of peace. The compass, I whispered. He told me to look in the compass, but I broke it. We have the original documentation, Blackstone assured me. Everything is legally secured. What happens now? Now, Mr. Rivera, you decide. The trust gives you full control, with certain provisions for financial education and management assistance. You can access funds immediately for housing, education, and personal needs. I thought about the years on the street, the hunger, the cold, the fear. And my mother, Richard? They know nothing of this yet. Your grandfather's instructions were explicit. They were to be informed only after you were. I stared out the window at the Chicago skyline, lights glittering against the night sky. The same city that had been both prison and teacher to me for nearly 4 years. I want to see them, I said finally. I want to look them in the eyes when they learn the truth. Blackstone nodded. That can be arranged. There's something else you should know. He slid a final document across the table, property records for my childhood home. Your mother and stepfather have been struggling financially for the past year. They've missed 3 mortgage payments. The bank is beginning foreclosure proceedings. I absorbed this information, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. They told me they'd lose the house if they kept me. A lie, Blackstone said simply. One of many, it seems. This revelation absolutely stunned me. If this story is touching your heart, please share it with someone who needs to believe life can turn around in unexpected ways. 2 days after my birthday, I moved into a suite at the Langham Hotel. Mr. Blackstone had arranged everything: a wardrobe of new clothes, a personal banker, and a crash course in managing sudden wealth. The trust included a provision for a financial advisor named Sarah Chen, who patiently explained concepts like investment diversification, tax implications, and philanthropic planning. Your grandfather was very thorough, she explained during our first meeting. The trust is structured to provide you with an excellent education in financial management while protecting the principal. I barely heard her. My mind was focused on the meeting scheduled for that afternoon. Mr. Blackstone had called my mother, telling her only that there were developments regarding James Rivera's estate that required immediate attention. They were coming to his office at 3 p.m. I would be waiting. "Mr. Rivera?" Sarah's voice broke through my thoughts. "Are you listening?" "Sorry," I said, straightening in my chair. "It's just strange. 3 days ago, I was washing dishes and sleeping in a maintenance closet." Her expression softened. "Your situation is unusual, but not unprecedented. I've worked with other clients who experienced sudden financial changes. The key is to move deliberately, not reactively." By 2:30 p.m., I was sitting in Blackstone's conference room, dressed in a tailored navy suit that cost more than I'd earned in the past 6 months combined. The compass, cracked but still intact, sat on the polished table before me. I'd retrieved it from my storage unit that morning. "Are you sure you want to be present for this?" Blackstone asked, arranging documents on the table. "I can handle the disclosure alone." "I need to see their faces," I replied. "I need them to see mine." At precisely 3 p.m., his receptionist announced their arrival. I stood, heart pounding, as the conference room door opened. My mother entered first. She'd aged, new lines around her eyes, hair shorter and styled differently. She was wearing an outfit I didn't recognize, clothes that spoke of trying too hard to appear prosperous. Richard followed, heavier than I remembered, his once confident stride now weighted with stress. They didn't notice me at first, their attention on Blackstone. Then my mother turned, her eyes widening, hand flying to her mouth. "Alex?" she whispered, frozen in place. "Hello, Mom," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Richard's expression cycled rapidly through confusion, recognition, and calculation. "What's going on here?" he demanded, looking between me and Blackstone. "What's he doing here?" "Please, sit down," Blackstone directed, gesturing to the chairs across from me. "As I mentioned on the phone, there have been developments regarding James Rivera's estate." My mother couldn't stop staring at me. "Alex, mihijo, you look—" "Different," I supplied. 4 years on the streets will do that." Her face crumpled. "We tried to find you. We called your aunt." "Her phone was disconnected," I said flatly. "I told you that. You said I couldn't come back." "We were in a terrible financial position," Richard interjected, his tone defensive. "We could barely keep ourselves afloat." Blackstone cleared his throat. "Actually, Mr. Thompson, that's precisely why we're here." He slid copies of the bank statements across the table, the same ones he'd shown me, documenting years of $8,000 monthly payments to my mother's account. "Perhaps you can explain these." The color drained from Richard's face as he scanned the documents. My mother looked confused, then horrified as understanding dawned. "You were receiving this money the entire time?" I asked her directly. "Even after you threw me out?" I didn't know," she stammered, turning to Richard. "What is this?" Richard's expression hardened. "Your father's money came with strings attached. It was for specific purposes." "Like the BMW?" I interrupted. "I saw you both, a year after I left. New car, shopping bags, laughing while I was digging through dumpsters for food." My mother began to sob. "Alex, please." "Mr. Blackstone," I said, cutting off whatever excuse was coming, "could you please explain the full situation to my mother and stepfather?" Blackstone nodded and proceeded to outline everything. My grandfather's suspicions, the false story about the Conservation Foundation, the true extent of the trust, and my position as sole beneficiary. With each revelation, Richard's face grew darker, while my mother seemed to physically shrink in her chair. "That's impossible," Richard finally sputtered. "The old man hated me. He wouldn't—" "He didn't do it for you," I said quietly. "He did it for me. to reveal who you really were. And now, Blackstone continued smoothly, Mr. Rivera has instructed me to address your current financial situation. I understand you're facing foreclosure on your home? Richard flinched as if slapped. My mother looked up in alarm. Foreclosure? Richard, you said we were just refinancing. We've reviewed your financial records as part of our investigation. You've accumulated substantial debt. $127,000 in credit cards, $42,000 in personal loans, and 3 months of mortgage arrears totaling $11,400. I watched the humiliation wash over Richard's face, the same humiliation I'd felt sleeping in shelters and washing strangers' cars while pretending I wasn't homeless. "What do you want?" Richard asked me, his voice hard. "To watch us get thrown out on the street like you were? Is that your revenge?" I looked at my mother, really looked at her. The woman who had once kissed my forehead every morning and called me mijo was now a stranger, broken by her own choices and the man beside her. I felt no triumph in her tears, no satisfaction in Richard's rage. "No," I said finally, "that's not what I want." I turned to Blackstone and nodded. He produced another document. "Mr. Rivera has instructed me to establish a separate trust for Mrs. Thompson, Elena Rivera Thompson, in the amount of $250,000. This trust will pay off your current mortgage arrears and provide a monthly stipend of $3,000, managed directly by our firm. The house will be transferred solely into Mrs. Thompson's name." My mother looked up, disbelief in her tear-streaked face. "Alex?" "The stipend comes with conditions," I continued. "First, Richard moves out, today. Second, you seek counseling. The trust will cover the cost. Third, you work with a financial advisor to learn how to manage money independently." Richard's face contorted with fury. "You can't do this! That's my house!" "Actually," Blackstone interjected, "the mortgage is solely in Mrs. Thompson's name. You're not on the deed, Mr. Thompson." I stood up, buttoning my suit jacket. I didn't come back for revenge. I came back to set my mother free, just like I was set free. I picked up the cracked compass from the table. Grandpa was right. Family never abandons family. You were never family, Richard. I walked to the door, then paused. "Mom, Mr. Blackstone will explain the details. I'm going back to school. Northwestern accepted me for the spring semester. I'll be around if you want to rebuild what we lost, but it's your choice now." As I stepped into the hallway, I heard Richard's angry voice, followed by my mother's, stronger than I remembered, saying clearly, "Get out of my house, Richard. It's over." 2 years later, I stand at the window of my Lakeshore Drive apartment, watching the sunrise paint Lake Michigan in shades of gold and pink. At 20, I'm halfway through my business and social policy degree at Northwestern, maintaining a 3.8 GPA while managing the Rivera Foundation, which I established 6 months after my 18th birthday. The compass sits on my desk, still cracked, but now mounted in a custom frame alongside my grandfather's letter. I keep it as a reminder that sometimes we must get lost before we can find our true direction. My mother lives in a modest condo in Lincoln Park that I helped her purchase after she sold the house. The divorce from Richard was finalized 18 months ago. Messier than expected when he tried to claim half of her trust. Mr. Blackstone's ironclad legal work ensured he walked away with nothing but the debts he'd incurred in his own name. She's working again, not out of financial necessity, but for purpose, teaching Spanish at a community center 3 days a week. We meet for dinner every other Sunday, rebuilding slowly. Some conversations still end in tears, others in laughter. Healing isn't linear, as my therapist, Dr. Winters, often reminds me. Richard relocated to Phoenix, according to LinkedIn. I don't follow his life, but occasionally his name comes up when my mother mentions the divorce. He tried contacting me once with a business proposal that Blackstone intercepted and declined on my behalf. The Rivera Foundation has become my passion, a $10 million endowment specifically targeting youth homelessness in Chicago. We've opened 2 transitional housing centers, providing not just shelter, but education support, job training, and mental health services. The first center, Elijah House, is named for the veteran who shared his winter condo with me during those brutal Chicago winters. Ms. Reeves, the social worker who helped me get my GED, now serves as the Foundation's Director of Education Programs. When I offered her the position, she hugged me and said, "I told you education was your way out. I just didn't realize you'd build doors for others on your way." Last month, we helped our 256th young person secure stable housing. Each success story feels like redemption, not just for me, but for every kid sleeping in a park or riding the L train all night to stay warm. Joey from the car wash now manages our job training program, teaching kids the same work ethic he instilled in me. "I always knew you were different," he told me when I came back to offer him the job. "Didn't expect this different, though." Not everything is perfect. I still wake up sometimes in a cold sweat, momentarily disoriented, believing I'm back in the maintenance closet or behind the convention center. Dr. Winters calls it survival memory, the body's way of remembering trauma. It fades, she promises, but it never completely disappears. That's okay. It's part of your story. My grandfather's financial lessons continue through the trust structure he created. Each quarter, I meet with financial advisors to review investment strategies and philanthropic impact. He built this to teach you, not just fund you, Sarah Chan explained during our last meeting. The restrictions loosen as you demonstrate understanding and responsibility. Last week, I visited his grave for the first time since the funeral. I brought white roses, his favorite, and sat beside the simple headstone, telling him everything. How his plan worked, though not without cost. How the compass finally led me home, though not the home I'd left. How the legacy he built wasn't just financial, but ethical, a blueprint for using privilege to create opportunity. "Your grandfather was playing chess while everyone else played checkers," Blackstone told me recently. "He saw Richard's character clearly, predicted your mother's choices, and trusted you would emerge stronger. Most importantly, he ensured you'd have the resources to rebuild on your own terms." I've learned that wealth creates opportunity, but character determines what you do with that opportunity. Money didn't make me who I am. Homelessness did. Hunger did. Survival did. The $42 million gave me options, but my experiences gave me purpose. There was a boy at our newest shelter last month, Darnell, 14 years old, thrown out after his mother's boyfriend decided he was too much trouble. I recognized myself in his defensive posture, the way he hoarded food, how he flinched at sudden movements. "It gets better," I told him, not as platitude, but promise. Not magically, not easily, but it gets better if you keep moving forward. "How would you know?" he challenged, skeptical as I would have been. I showed him a picture on my phone, me at 16, hollow-cheeked and wary-eyed, standing outside the car wash in my uniform. "Because I was you," I said simply, "and someone helped me when I needed it most. Now it's my turn to help you." His eyes widened slightly, not quite belief, but the first crack in a hardened shell. It was enough. Sometimes the most important gift isn't money or shelter, but the knowledge that someone else walked your path and survived. Not everyone gets a $42 million second chance. I know this makes my story exceptional rather than representative, but the principles remain universal. Resilience can be built, systems can be changed, and cycles can be broken. My grandfather's last gift wasn't the money. It was the lesson that true wealth lies in what we build for others. His careful planning wasn't just about exposing Richard or securing my future. It was about creating a foundation from which I could extend the same lifeline to others. When I look back at the 14-year-old boy carrying a backpack and broken dreams, I feel a complicated mixture of grief and gratitude. I grieve for the childhood that was stolen, for the years spent in survival mode rather than growth. But I'm grateful for the perspective those years gave me. an understanding of human vulnerability and strength that no university could teach. People often ask if I'm angry at my mother. The answer changes daily. Some mornings I wake up filled with forgiveness, remembering how Richard manipulated her, isolated her from support systems, and leveraged her insecurities. Other days, the 14-year-old within me rages that a mother should protect her child above all else. Dr. Winters says both reactions are valid, that reconciliation doesn't require forgetting. During our last Sunday dinner, my mother finally asked the question she'd been avoiding for 2 years. "How did you survive out there, mijo?" I told her about sleeping in shifts at shelters so other kids wouldn't steal my shoes, about washing in public restrooms and studying under street lamps, about Elijah teaching me which alleys to avoid and which restaurant workers might slip you leftover food if you waited by the back door at closing time. She cried, of course. But for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for her tears. Her grief was hers to carry, just as my survival had been mine. "I failed you," she whispered. "Yes," I said simply, "but that's not the end of our story unless we choose it to be." That's what I've learned about trauma and healing. They're not endpoints, but processes, constantly evolving as we integrate them into our understanding of ourselves. The boy who slept behind the convention center will always be part of me, but he's no longer all of me. Last semester, I took a class on intergenerational wealth and poverty cycles. The professor asked us to identify turning points in economic mobility, moments when trajectories fundamentally changed. My classmates mentioned education, marriage, entrepreneurship. I thought about my grandfather's compass, about the moment I smashed it in despair, not realizing salvation was hidden inside all along. Sometimes help is there but concealed, waiting for the right moment. Sometimes we have to break before we discover what we're truly made of. The Rivera Foundation recently purchased a building near where I used to wash cars. We're converting it into a community resource center with GED classes, job training, and temporary housing for youth in transition. The sign outside will read, "Finding Your Way Home." Below it, a simple compass rose will point in all directions, because home isn't always where you came from, but where you choose to build it. I've started speaking at schools and youth programs about homelessness, trying to humanize an issue many prefer to ignore. Not everyone living on the street is there because of addiction or mental illness, I tell them. Sometimes they're just kids whose safety nets collapsed. Sometimes they're teenagers whose families failed them. They're not seeking pity, they're seeking possibility. For every success story at our foundation, there are 10 more young people still struggling. The system remains broken, with too few resources and too many barriers. But each life redirected matters. Each kid who finds stability becomes a potential circuit breaker for generational trauma. Darnell, the 14-year-old from the shelter, enrolled in school last week. When he showed me his class schedule, there was a tentative pride in his eyes that I recognized. The first fragile belief that tomorrow might be better than today. I've established a college fund in his name, though he doesn't know it yet. Sometimes, hope is best revealed gradually, when someone is ready to receive it. My grandfather understood this. His plan wasn't just clever, but compassionate in its execution. He could have simply left me the money with a letter explaining Richard's manipulations. Instead, he crafted a path that would reveal truth through experience, ensuring I'd not only have resources, but the wisdom to use them meaningfully. "Some lessons can't be taught, only lived," he wrote near the end of his letter. "Forgive me for the hardship, Alex, but never doubt my faith in your strength to endure it." As the sun completes its rise over Lake Michigan, painting my apartment in morning light, I rest my hand on the framed compass. The crack across its face catches the sunlight, creating a prism effect. Brokenness transformed into unexpected beauty. That's my story. From burden to blessing, from abandoned to abundant, not by magic or miracle, but through resilience, opportunity, and the hidden hand of someone who believed in me even after he was gone. If this story has touched your heart, if you believe in second chances and the power of unexpected blessings, please like, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications. In the comments, share your own story of resilience. Let's support each other. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their story isn't over yet, that the darkest chapters don't determine the ending. Remember, your journey still has unwritten pages, and the best chapters may be just ahead. Until our next video, may you find your own compass when you need it most. God bless you.